Welcome back to Albums of a Year. So these are our top 5 from 1985.
Yeah. We started this back in April, and it's taken us a while to make this video because we've just been doing reaction videos, which have been fun.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of good music from this year, so from 2022, I should say. But also from 1985, as we were able to discover.
We needed a bit of time to actually get into these albums because this is kind of a very new year for both of us. We're not 80s fans in general, so it was kind of a new sound, and there's a lot to explore. We each listened to about 30 albums. It was a bit to get into them, so yeah, it took a longer time, but yeah.
Yeah, like I didn't listen to a lot of music from the 80s, and kind of because I never really got into the sound. I thought the production sounded a bit cheesy, and a lot of 80s songs I just found overplayed. So I think I just had this bias against it. And then getting into some albums, there's actually some really, really good music from 1985. So it's like, okay, despite fitting into that 80s kind of aesthetic, there's some talented musicians.
Yeah.
Really good albums.
Despite that, there also is a lot of exactly what we were expecting kind of music. And getting through that was a little bit like, okay, this is really cheesy. But I think you can also get into almost like a blissful soundstage of just like your head is in 80s mode, so it's all fine.
Exactly, yeah. Like once I kind of immersed myself into it, I was like, oh yeah, I get it. I get the nostalgia of it, even though I didn't grow up in the 80s or anything.
Yeah. Well, starting off at number 5, do you want to start?
Oh, sure. Usually you start, but I'll start this time.
Mix it up.
So my number 5 album is a pretty weird one, and I think it stood out to me because it didn't fit the mold of usual 80s music at all. And I know that this artist rarely does fit into kind of a certain mold or an aesthetic, other than his own, and that is Tom Waits with the album Rain Dogs. This album was very strange. I really enjoyed it though. It's long, but it has a lot of tracks, but short tracks, and each track is almost like a vignette. And some of them are just frightening or scary or just unsettling. Some of them are groovy or fun. But the thing that stood out to me the most in this album was the singing, of course. Like Tom Waits has a really almost kind of scary, gravelly voice that reminds you of like a drunk wandering through an alleyway. And then also the instrumentation, because there's a lot of random instruments in that album, a lot of strange just sounds, like pots and pans and bells and stuff jangling around, some guitars, but and percussion, but it very sparse too, right? It wasn't like a rock music really. I don't know how to describe a lot of it. It was just very fun and weird, and the album cover just really stood out to me as well. The whole aesthetic of it just felt like sort of a rainy day back alley sort of like London after a night of drinking. Very interesting stuff, and so I really like that album. It really stood out to me.
I listened to this one too, and just starting with the first song, Singapore, I just was like, what the heck is this? This is not at all what I was expecting.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I would never have expected this. It was a very strange, almost like carnival sound.
Yes, that's exactly what.
With bluesy elements at times, and it's like, this is really weird. And I just remember one lyric from there that is something along the line, I'm going to butcher it, but something along the lines of in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king.
Yep.
Which is just such a good lyric.
I remember that.
So many really cool lyrics like that in this album that just give it a really weird lyrical or thematic twist that makes it's really original. So
totally. Yeah. So what was your number 5?
My number 5 is Thursday Afternoon by Brian Eno. When we went into 1985 to explore, this was the one album that I'd listened to before, and it's my favorite Brian Eno album.
Oh, cool. And
so I was like, this is cool. And it's just so relaxing. I've meditated to this so many times, and I feel like it's a very grounding album. It's like 55 minutes or 50 minutes or something, and it's one song. Essentially, it doesn't change very much at all, but it just kind of adds a few layers, and then takes them away, and then adds a different layer, and kind of just twists this very nice synth bell melody, or marimba melody. I don't exactly know what the instrument is, but kind of just twists it. It's very calming. I think it's in the major pentatonic, which is the Zen key, and it's just a really relaxing album. If you want to get into ambient music, I'd have to recommend this one because it's just very beautiful and calming. It kind of centers me. So
yeah, it's a good Brian Eno album. I like a lot of Brian Eno. That album specifically reminded me a lot of the not by Brian Eno, but one that I liked from 1979, which is the Automatic Writing by, I can't remember what the artist's name was, Robert Ashley, I think. I should fact check that. But Automatic Writing, which was a really cool ambient album that was just one track that sort of was like something that you almost feels like background music to a home or a house.
Mm-hmm.
Really cool. Although a lot more experimental. This was like standard Brian Eno.
Yeah.
Very good. Can't go wrong.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Brian Eno is pretty consistently good. Yeah.
Yeah. Has just a very particular ambient sound. That's just great.
Yeah.
Then my number 4 is Dead Man's Party by Oingo Boingo.
Oh, I've not heard this one.
Oh, it's a really fun album. So it's like pretty much the epitome of like Halloween music. It's a really like weird and like spooky kind of album. Like it's not actually scary music or anything. It's not like haunting or dark. It's just like a very fun music that could be like the backdrop to like, you know, like a Halloween dress up party kind of type of thing. It's like the album cover is inspired by like the Day of the Dead sort of thing, the Mexican like celebration, and the album covers are like, you know, skeletons dancing, spooky, scary skeletons, and the, you know, Danny Elfman is the kind of lead like singer of Boingo, and like went on to do a lot of really great soundtracks like for Spider-Man or Batman or right, and you kind of get that like, you know, soundtrack sort of aspect to the writing or like to the sound of it. Like a lot of the things are very cinematic, very dramatic, very huge, and you know, bombastic, and the singing's like very all over the place and very fun.
What genre is this?
New wave. It's like a mixture of like rock, pop, new wave, and just like Danny Elfman, who has his own style that he brings to things. So like a lot of the lyrics have to do with like, you know, like kind of like horror themes, you know, stuff like that. There's a song, one of the best songs on the album, is kind of like about a werewolf or whatever. It's great stuff, and like there's such an energy to every song that is just really fun. It's sort of like, if you like Talking Heads, it's very similar.
Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, so that's definitely one of my favorite albums from 1985. And
Nice.
I totally recommend it.
Cool. My 4th is Promise by Sade. This is like a smooth soul album. And I have a soft spot in my heart for 80s soul. Just something about it like speaks to me. And this album just has such a strength and passion to it that like, it's just almost addicting. Like I just keep coming back to this album because it's just like, and then it has like, yeah, of course you have really long melancholic, like, maybe not really long, like 6 minutes, like ballads and all of that sort of thing. And then you have like really, you know, hard hitters kind of thing. It's all just very smooth and very nice to listen to, with like all the harmonies and the really, a little bit cheesy, but like, it's kind of nice. Like the instrumentation and all of that.
Guessing a lot of reverb.
Oh, tons of reverb. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And okay, so there's a song on here called Tar Baby, and that is the song from like the meme song from like the Macintosh album.
Oh really?
The Vaporwave album.
Oh,
it's the meme song uses this one, and so when this came on, yeah,
that one.
I was like, when it came on, I was like, it's the meme.
And it would be actually like full speed. It wouldn't be like the slowed down version.
Yeah, and it wasn't cut up and stuff. That song, they actually changed it a lot in the Macintosh.
Interesting.
But yeah, I was like, cool, and the actual song was like really good. So
cool. I actually want to listen to that now.
Yeah. And that, I guess, made that stand out a little bit because I was like,
We didn't expect that.
no, I didn't at all. Yeah.
That's great.
What's your 3rd?
My number 3 is a pretty popular 80s album. Like, I'm sure you've listened to this as well. And it's on the radio. A lot of the songs on it are on the radio a lot. And that's the Songs from the Big Chair by Tears for Fears. So, you know, totally fits into that 80s sound. But, like, you can tell that, like, Tears for Fears, they, like, not only just embrace that aesthetic of, like, you know, the huge reverb drums, like, the, you know, the kind of classic, now kind of cheesy synths, like, the sort of, like, really anthemic singing, right? But, like, somehow when you listen to that album, kind of trying to ignore, like, the, you know, any preconceptions you might have of, like, that 80s kind of cheesiness. It's really beautiful music, and like they really, I think, excel in taking that sort of sound and like going further with it and making it sound actually very like uplifting and positive and life affirming. And the first 3 songs, especially on that album, are incredibly good. Like probably some of the best songs of the decade. So really, really good stuff. I haven't listened to like a lot of other Tears for Fears, but I kind of want to now because that album like really impressed me. And I know, of course, I heard like the singles like Shout and Everybody Wants to Rule the World.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, the whole album's really good.
Yeah, I listened to this one. I've listened to this one a ton over the years.
I'm sure.
And I do think that Seeds of Love, which is less obscure by them.
Seeds of Love is probably better.
I think I like it a lot better.
Yeah.
But this album definitely has a strong start to it. I just feel like it kind of drags by the end. But
that's fair. That's fair. I think that the first half is better than the second half. But
it is a big chair, so.
Yeah. But I still really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So. What's your number 3?
My number 3, this was a hard one. The top 3 for me, choosing was really hard, but I think I just chose based on what resonated with me in the end. This one is Hounds of Love by Kate Bush.
Oh, yeah.
This album is incredibly experimental and weird at times, but it starts pretty normal, and then it just kind of gets progressively weird. In the middle of the album's like, what am I listening to? And then the more I listen to it, it's like, this actually makes sense. It feels cohesive. It doesn't feel too long. Like,
definitely not.
It feels like there are just so many different ideas, and then it's like, it's already over. Like, what? They bring in like Irish folk elements a bunch, and like I think
the jig song.
Yeah,
Jig of Life.
Yeah, Jig of Life, and it's like, this is awesome. I listen to this kind of music, just like medieval folk and you know, that kind of thing. All the times, it's like, this is really cool to hear this in this context. Like, and of course, yeah, you also have cut up vocals and like really haunting, almost like growly, like almost death growl sometimes, and it's like, this is a pop album. It's really, really weird, and it definitely went on to like influence, maybe even start the genre of like hyper pop or like kind of experimental pop that we see a lot nowadays.
Totally
with artists like Sophie.
Well, I know like St. Vincent, for example, is like her biggest influence is Kate Bush.
I can totally see that. I was actually thinking when listening to this, like, oh, this kind of
even the vocal sound is like
St. Vincent. Yeah. But yeah, that's really, really weird, interesting album. And if you're like, I'm not usually into pop, and like the melodies, they stick, but also they're weird enough, and the instrumentals are weird enough to make it so that even like a more experimental listener can go like, huh, I can really appreciate this. This is good music. So yeah.
More on that later. My number 2 is Low Life by New Order. So I've listened to, of course, you know, Joy Division and some New Order, and this album was really good. Like, it starts with first off, it's like a post-punk new wave sort of thing. Yeah. I'd say that this is their transition into more new wave, though, because they were mostly still post-punk in the early 80s, and then they
also gothic rock is an element,
right? That's more Joy Division.
Okay. So
the band, of course, before the lead singer passed away. And so New Order was sort of like a new band based on members of Joy Division, and they went into a more new wave style.
That makes sense. Yeah.
By this point, and you know, they include a lot more synths, a kind of like brighter sound, and like, but they still strayed away from like the stereotypical 80s sound for the most part. And this album Low Life starts with a really poignant song that like is probably one of the reasons the album's this high for me. It's a song about a Vietnam War veteran that comes home, and the song's mostly about him excited to see his wife and kids again because he's been away in the awful Vietnam War for so long. And then when he gets home, he finds that his wife had killed herself because she got a telegram saying that he died in the war. Oh. And I'm just like, wow, like that's what they start the album with, like this like very harrowing song, which still has like the sort of like bright sort of like pop sound to it, like, you know, jangly sort of new wave sort of sound to it. And like, whoa, that's like some really interesting subject matter. And then the rest of the album just has like this sort of like sense of melancholy and darkness, like teetering on the edge the whole time. And there's one song in the middle that's like really poignant to me, and it's called Elegia. Yeah, it's that track.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and it's like it's instrumental track right in the middle of the album. That's just like really, really awesome. It just has like, you know, this kind of like, you know, ray of sunlight synths in it. This sort of like very, very like building sort of like guitar rock instrumental, and it's just beautiful. So I think that album, because of that middle track and because of the first track, like enhanced like what could have been like a regular, more whatever like new wave post-punk album into something that was like really, really good for me. So yeah, it was one of my favorites from the year, and I went back to probably the most out of any other album. So
cool. I did not somehow this one slipped through my fingers. So
yeah,
I'll have to check this one out.
You should. So what's your number 2?
My number 2 is a really weird name, so I'm gonna actually look. It is "What Does Anything Mean?" ? Basically. By the Chameleons.
Okay.
So this album is like a post-punk album. You know, it has the whole 80s production to it, but I feel like it just has so much passion to it that you don't. You do find it a lot in a lot of other music, but here it's just like there's an edge to it. There's a kind of like, I don't know. Passion is the only word that really comes to mind. Some of the songs just soar. Some of the songs have kind of a almost spacey darkness to them. Some of the songs have just like a really nice groove with a really solid melody that I just keeps drawing me back, and overall, while this album doesn't it's not weird. It's almost hard to describe it as being different. It really stood out. It really connected with me on an emotional level. I think because mainly the melodies were very the voice is very resonant. There's a very whoa kind of quality to it. That really cut through the soundstage of all of that kind of ambience and light kind of instrumentation, and really cool album.
Nice. So we'll now move on to honorable mentions, I guess. My 3 honorable mentions, to be brief. One of them is a very abrasive album, but it's I wanted to listen to it specifically because I heard that it was sort of a precursor to shoegaze in a way, and also noise music, and it really fits in that sort of niche. And that is the Jesus and Mary Chain's Psycho Candy.
This one was cool.
Yeah, this was very cool. But I could not bring myself to listen to it very much because I felt like by the end of it, my ears were bleeding. But it's a really cool sound. I feel like it's almost what they were doing is My Bloody Valentine would do better in a way. That's what kind of the vibe I got from it. They were sort of wall of sound, lots of harsh noise, rock music with very grating sort of guitars, right?
I connected this album in my mind way more to Have a Nice Life. It had more that kind of sound to it.
Sure, I guess the singing is similar too.
Yeah.
That's fair. Have a Nice Life for me is so removed from this era, but yeah, I guess so. But yeah, it has that sort of sense of, I don't know about despair, but there's a sense of turmoil or angst, kind of embroiled in that sort of sound. It's a short album, but the songs are just intense, even though they're technically soft. It's just that the instrumentation is so sharp to listen to.
Yeah.
But a very, very unique sound. It definitely stood out to anything else I listened to in '85. So. My other honorable mention would be Einstürzende Neubauten's album Honourable Mentions. So they're a no-wave band from Germany, and they're an influence, and contemporary bands like Swans, right? And they have a more industrial sound that's really, really dark and evil and harsh sounding. And they, German singing that's very guttural and very chant-like. Great. And the album art is a bunch of teeth around the edges and then this weird voodoo doll type thing in the middle. It's great. And it totally fits the sound of their music. It's just very creepy and just disturbing music. So this was not an album I'm going to listen to much, but it's a cool experience.
Nice.
And then the third album is one I almost put in my top 5, but just barely took off, and that was the Smiths' Meat Is Murder. So really, really like that album. This not the best Smiths album, but it's really, really solid the whole way through. And I just love their sound. They have this good fusion of new wave, post-punk, and pop rock.
Yeah.
It's just great. So anyway, moving on to your honorable mentions.
Yeah, I think it just fits for me to start with Meat Is Murder by the Smiths.
Cool.
I really connected to this band. This was the first album by them that I listened to.
Me too, actually.
Yeah, and I was this is really cool, and I guess they just did post-punk really good.
And the singer's voice is just...
And his voice, yeah, it has a certain floaty quality to it, where he doesn't really need to stick to the notes. His melodies are kind of just all over the place, but it works.
Yeah.
And Barbarism in the Home really got
that's a dark song.
Second to last track was just the groove is so good, the vocals are so dark. It's this is so cool, and then the final track is really sad, and because I'm over vegetarian or whatever, I kind of connect to the lyrics, and it's
a pretty
really
big condemnation of the the food industry.
Yeah, exactly. So, eating meat and all that, and it's this is a very interesting album, but sadly I've listened to it a bunch, and I think that only Barbarism Starts in the Home is really the only track.
Barbarism begins at home.
Yeah. That's the only track that really continues to stand out to me. The other ones kind of are still I'm just waiting for that track, so it's I can't actually include this. But
yeah, I think for me too, it just wasn't as strong as my top 5, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I listened to it a lot.
It's really cool. I'm definitely going to be getting to that band more because I really like it.
You should listen to Queen is Dead.
Cool.
That's the big one.
I will.
What else? What other honorable mentions?
So Tom Waits' Rain Dogs,
cool.
Which we already talked about, was on there. It was just so weird and such a fun experience, and it's I have to recommend this to people. Just if they're what is weird music that you listen to, then I'll just send them this one, and it's this one's really good, and I'll explain it as though it's a normal rock album, and they'll listen to it and they'll be like, what the fuck?
I mean, it's almost like when you show someone Captain Beefheart's.
Yeah. It really, it's almost that weird. It's what the heck? I have 2 more. So one is Ignite the Seven Cannons by Felt. This album it has the like the 80s production to it, but I feel like it's also similar to Jesus and the Mary Chain, similar to like that in that it's a precursor to shoegaze and that kind of sound.
Nice.
It has a very weird singing to it that really stood out to me and really like connected with me, but it's not an album I throw on a lot because it is very it's just it feels very blank. It feels like after listening to it, it's like, what did I just listen to? It's like it just erases itself from my mind. So yeah. And then I also got Steve McQueen by Prefab Sprout.
Okay, interesting.
This one was like a pretty standard 80s pop album. It had some country elements too, actually quite a few country elements. And I feel like it starts pretty, mediocre and all of that, but the last bunch of songs are actually like really good, and I, have added a few to my favorite songs of all time playlist, so or just one of them to that. So it's like, really weird how you can have like, and it's not even the most popular song at all, but it's like they had some really good inspiration and ideas and like emotion in there that I can really appreciate, and I feel like the more melancholic, not poppy country songs were really good. So yeah.
Awesome. We're going on to our number ones then.
Yeah.
So my number one is Hounds of Love by Kate Bush.
Yeah.
It was kind of no contest for me. Like even the gulf between this and my number two and the rest is actually pretty wide. So I listened to Low Life by New Order probably the most, but I don't know why. I just like that sound. But Kate Bush's Hounds of Love I liked enough to get like the CD for my car to kind of like listen to a lot. Because I got an older car and I can only have CDs in it. So it's just the way I get into music is just get a CD and then I forced to listen to it in my car. It's awesome. So yeah, I love Hounds of Love for the fact that it's structured like a double album, where you have like the first 5 tracks are kind of like these like dreamy, sort of like very like almost like floaty, head in the clouds type pop songs, right? Running Up That Hill is just an amazing song, It recently got really popular again because of Stranger Things, which is kind of fun.
Really?
Yeah, it went back to like number 1 in streaming for a while, I think, and just really popularized Kate Bush again, like now.
That's cool.
Yeah, because it's used in episode 1 of the new season, which is kind of fun. But the rest of the first half also just really, really nice, tracks that make you want to like just run and jump and and sprint. And then there's a turn about halfway through where suddenly things get weird. And I think Under the Ice is when it like really starts to shift.
Yeah.
And then there's like just the weird like backmasked vocals, the sort of like stuff going on in your ears. Like it sounds like subliminal messaging, and then the whole like apparently it's supposed to like be a bit of a concept album about someone that's like trapped under the ice and dying, and then starts to have like strange surreal like dreams before they die. And so like and so the
that makes it scarier.
Yeah. And so
I kind of got that from the lyrics and the song names and stuff. But I was like, I hope this is metaphorical, and it's like maybe not.
Yeah, like I mean it is, but it's like I don't know exactly what for.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not supposed to be just about
that
simply, right? Like Kate Bush is not your average 80s pop artist, like that's for sure. Like her album right before this I listened to afterwards called Dreaming, and it's all songs like the second half of this album. It's just the most wild 80s album I've heard thus far that's like by a pop artist. So I'm excited to listen to all of her music honestly. But yeah, I think because of the second half having that shift into like darker and more experimental territory, that's why this album's my number 1. Like if it was just songs like the first half, which I do love, it wouldn't be number 1 material. But because it has such a progressive element to it, I love this album, and I think it's like so unique and like I don't know, genre breaking.
The song Hello Earth, I think that's
the best one.
It's like that song is just so amazing. It's like I have to come back to this album. So
that's the climax of the album for me. It's just so wonderful and so like intense and amazing.
Yeah.
Whenever those drums hit, right? It's like it's awesome. And then I love Jig of Life, and I like Waking the Witch. All these tracks, really cool, good. Like no, Kate Bush and also she has such like a unique voice, right? So it really adds a lot to the whole sound, and her lyrics are so imaginative. It's great. So easy number 1, Kate Bush, Hounds of Love. What's your number 1?
Yeah, so for me I have a bit of a story. So I'll say my number 1 is Heyday by The Church. The Church is not one of the most popular post-punk / new wave bands, but they're like, I think my favorite.
I've never heard.
I've listened to them. Yeah, they have just this really fun kind of edge to it. Really cool lyrical themes. and again, just like the Chameleons one, it's like this doesn't stand out to me in terms of like it's experimental or it's weird, but I feel like it just takes the sound and does it so well, and like brings in, you know, all of the elements that they need, be it like strings sometimes or whatever, and they have like I guess they are pretty experimental at times, but overall I feel like that wasn't actually what stood out to me. What stood out to me was just like they did it so well, and so I found myself, this is a little story, going to like spring classes or whatever, going on the train. I would just be like, what music should I listen to? And then it's like, well, this album is good for the train because it's loud enough that like loud in its production that like I can hear things and it's not, you know, drowned out.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of subtler music, you know, you lose your lose a lot of the layers in the train.
Sure.
So it's like, this one's a good one. So I just would throw it on because it's like, I enjoy this. And then I just kept listening to it. And then every time I was in the train, I kept listening to it. And I was like, okay, I must really like this album if I've listened to this 10 times now.
Yeah.
And at this point, I'm almost getting over it. Like, I'm almost like, I can't put it on and enjoy it because I've listened to it too much, which shows I think this might be my favorite album. Even though, in some sense, it's not like the most critically acclaimed or like weird album. It's just like, it really connects to me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's our list. Top 5 plus a couple honorable mentions.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if you want to get into more 80s music, you could use our video as a bit of a guide.
Yeah.
I think we'll actually start posting links to the albums in the description,
Cool.
because this a way you can kind of get into them easier.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I guess we'll be spinning our wheel and seeing what year we land on next. And it's always fun to get into them. So stay tuned for whatever next year we get into. But probably the next video we'll make will be another reaction to some album.
Probably next month or so.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of our main content now. So yeah.
I will catch you later. He won't. I'll catch you later.